Welcome to the Fireball Mullet channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some regrets I had on the LS swap. Yeah, that's right, some mistakes, some regrets, however you want to look at it. For my third gen LS3 with the LSA supercharger on it from a CTSV, I want to talk about, there's a few things, guys, and you know, like they say, there's always, everybody has their own little dirty secrets when they're working on their car. On my swap, I'm going to expose those in today's video, and then towards the end I'm going to talk about the most regret that I have. So I've got quite a few. If you don't have a third gen Camaro Firebird, this should apply to any LS swap, a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about. So some things to consider if you're thinking about doing that LS swap. Let's get right to it. All right guys, I'm gonna give you a little bit of walk around here before we start talking about it, just to kind of give you an idea of the car. This is an 85 IROC Z. It's got a LS3 with the LSA supercharger on it. Right now, I'm just trying out my new drag pack. These are the fronts. My rear drag packs aren't working right now, so we're just putting some miles on it. But this is kind of the car here, just to kind of give you an idea what we're talking about today. I'll open up the hood for you. Yeah, just kind of do this quick walk around for you. All right, let's pop the hood. I'll show you a little bit of that. All right, let's take a look at this bad boy. Woo! There she is, man. Nice little setup. I've got the ICT setback plates in here, but yeah, LSX Concepts blower flex drive kit here. That's a pretty nice little setup, man. I got everything basically how I want it now, but we're going to talk about some regrets here as we kind of get through it, and I'll show you some of these things, at least the things that I can get to today. But that's the LS3 with the LSA. It's got flex fuel, so I can run E85 on it, so I can switch either one. The tune will adjust. But yeah, nice little setup here, guys. Now let's talk about some of those mistakes and regrets. The first thing we're talking about is the relay center. Now, since a swap, I've had this is from the GM Performance catalog for the LS3 controller kit. It came basically the ECM, which I have this whole system mounted through here, through the fender here, and then it comes through the kick panel inside the car, kind of like where a stock third gen would come through, and then the ECM is mounted under the dash. I like the ECM mounted under the dash, but the way I have it mounted there, I'm not happy with. So that's one of my first regrets, is the way that ECM is mounted. But also, this relay center, I just could never find a great place for it. As you can see, once I did the LSA, there's nothing really I can put in here in terms of the engine bay. I've got things stuffed in here as much as you can do. I even managed here recently to put the bottles back on, which even limited my space even more. So the reservoir's there. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure out. Now this one is just kind of sitting here. I'm thinking about maybe making some type of bracket, but if I had done this over, I would have also put this inside. I would have made it go through the firewall, or at least bring it up closer where I had more slack, where I could mount the ECM and this in a better position. So still not sure what I would have done with it, but if you guys are looking at where to mount your ECM, and with the Holley stuff, it's I think a lot more simpler now, so probably a moot point, but something to think about there. So that's number one. The second thing you're going to notice when you do an LS swap is, guess what? You're not going to have cruise control, especially with the drive-by-wire setup. So, you know, and again, all these things depend on what you're going to do with the car that's being swapped. Unfortunately, I drive this car a lot on the street. Now, this is also going to depend on what you do with the car. If it's a drag car, you don't care about cruise control, right? But I do. I take long trips and stuff like that, and that's something I would like to try to figure out. Now, I know Dakota Digital has one that we can use, and I may be able to use the stock switch here, so I'm kind of researching that now. But that's obviously something I lost during the swap. So if you're doing, you know, if you're doing kind of like, hey, comparing you know, should I do the LS swap or not? Just something to consider as well, right? Just cut my lights off there. All right, so that's number 2. I like to take this moment to ask for you guys' support. Please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm trying to get to that 10,000 here soon. It would be much appreciated as we build this community together. Let's get back to the next one. Let's talk about number 3. Now, there's a couple of regrets on this one. The first one is, now I used a Air Raid Universal You Build It kit. It's very nice, right? It doesn't come painted like this, and I kind of screwed up the painting, which is one of my regrets. I'm gonna have this stripped down and redo it. It's hard to paint plastic, I'm finding, so I'm gonna basically scrap this, figure out another way to do it. But my biggest concern is this is not a cold air intake, okay? There's a lot of heat coming from those headers, which we'll talk about in a minute, but this thing will suck up some heat out of this engine bay. And of course, I've got the functional louvers in this car, so that definitely helps with circulating heat outside of the engine bay, etc. But you may not, and this thing will suck some freaking hot air. And your IATs, you're gonna get heat soak. And any of you guys that know engines, as soon as it sees heat soak, it starts dropping timing. You're going to lose all kinds of power. I don't know if I'm gonna build like a custom box here. I know also Air Raid sells a universal air box that has an opening in it. Some guys do a 90 and actually have this under the car, but the only problem I have with that is just getting wet. Like I said, I drive this car in the rain. So, you know, that's one thing that we need to consider there, right? Is building some type of, you know, box here, maybe with a rubber thing, and it seals it to the hood. I don't know, I got to figure that one out. The next thing's gonna be, you know, the engine bay's black. I wish I had, while everything was out, I would have painted it all red to match this beautiful red color of the car here. Man, I think it would just be so much nicer having it, you know, the same as the body color. When I bought the car, it was already painted black, and that was just one item that I just felt like I didn't want to take on right now during the swap because I had so much going on. But man, because it was all pulled out, everything was out, it would have been a perfect time to really take care of that. So that's my next regret. The next regret that we're going to be talking about is these headers, man. These are Speed Engineering long tube headers, 1 7/8 inch. Now, I love these headers. They actually work great. But man, you know, it's not like stock manifolds, where stock manifolds are super thick and they actually don't produce as much heat as like these thin wall long tube headers do, and most of them are like that, right? Your headers are just producing a tremendous amount of heat underneath this hood. And I wish I had it done ceramic coated, because I did that on my 5th gen and that made a world of difference. So I do have another video coming up, because we'll talk about this in a minute, but exhaust issues. I actually bought another set of headers and I'm gonna have them ceramic coated. So it's taken me a few years, but we'll rectify that situation. And then speaking of the headers, you'll find that, and especially on these 3rd gens, but I'm sure other cars are like this, if you're gonna run long tube headers, if you decided, hey, mid-lengths or short manifolds, I gotta have all the power I can get out, which these LSs love long tube headers, I'm just gonna tell you that, then, you know, just know that, especially on this car, that's gonna be the lowest point on this car, right? It's gonna be those headers, collectors. So now I've got RideTech Air Ride, so I don't worry about it now, but the way you connect those collectors to the rest of your exhaust, your connection pipes and your mid pipes, when I first did the swap, I had Ibach Sportline springs. There was no way I could run like a V-band or anything like that. The exhaust shop ended up just welding the connection pipes to the collectors, and I was like, why the hell would you do that? Like, this is a hot rod. I got to be able to, like, you know, put a clutch in and do stuff. And so first thing I had to do was cut that connection, and then I was like, okay. So then in the next shop, put a band clamp over top of that connection. Anyway, long story short, the exhaust to me, I went through 3 or 4 different configurations here. I did a true dual by Speed Engineering. The drone was too much for me, but it sounded pretty kick-ass. I got a video on that, so check that out. Right now, it's running a single 4-inch, and I've got a Varex. It actually has an electronic switch where I can go in quiet mode, where it runs through different chambers, or I can just go in here, click this button right here. I click the button, it'll actually go into loud mode, and then it's straight through the muffler. So, exhaust, man. Just, you know, look at what people's done, research, try to figure out a plan of what you're gonna do with the exhaust. It can be a pain in the ass, is all I'm saying. The next thing's gonna be, man, this stock AC box, I wish I had have just gone vintage air. It takes up so much room here, it's unbelievable. I got a little bit of spray foam in here just to kind of seal the top of it. But I mean, look at this. You know, trying to get to the number 8 spark plug is impossible. You almost have to remove this in order to get to that spark plug. But I was looking at it on a lift last time, and I did see it where maybe I could get to it. If I could get through the collectors there, I might be able to actually get to it. So I'm gonna try that next time. But going to a vintage air setup would free up this whole area right there, because basically you just have 4 hoses in a bulkhead going right here, and all this stuff ends up being in under the dash the way their setup works. The AC, while I have it, you know, I've got a Sandin, I think 508 compressor. All that works good on a LSX Concepts bracket. But you know, I think that's one thing that I would have done different while it's all out again, you know, and done something different there. My next thing is the whole relay setup, man. I've had relays go out. I've just had bad luck, and I don't know if I'm buying like cheap Chinese relays or if they're all Chinese now. I don't know, but I know I've got enough amperage on the wire gauge to support it. But you know, fuel, I've had problem with my fuel relays, I've had problem with my fan relays. I think I've fixed both. This GM Performance E67 ECM actually has the 2 outputs, one for a low fan and one for a high fan, where you can actually control, you know, your fans, but they merge it together in their infinite wisdom, right? So out of the box, you can only run, and then they only have 1 relay, right? So you basically running 2 fans off of 1 relay. So I think that was an issue. What I did was I went into the harness and split that circuit out and ended up with 2 different circuits back coming out of the ECM, and then I put a relay for each one of those. And then in HP tuners, I went ahead and set one to come on at a lower speed and then one to come on a higher speed, so they both run on a super hot day or AC's running. So that's kind of how I think I fixed that. But if I have any other issues, I think what I'm going to do, MSD makes a solid state relay and it's super easy. I think it's going to solve the problems, and I think I'm going to go that way the next time we do it. The other thing I kind of regret, and I wish I had figured out something different, is all these wires and hoses that run in this area here, basically by the steering column, by the headers. I've got everything from the brake lines, the fuel lines, wiring, you know, coming in from, you know, all kinds of sources there, man. They're just kind of all stuck in this area, and it's a high heat area. You can see I've got a bunch of wires sort of routed through here. Just wish I had thought about that a little bit more and cleaned that up and routed them outside as much as possible of this heat area, because like I said, it's a very hot area. Now, I did pick up the Holley heat shield. They make a LS swap heat shield that covers your fuel lines and all those areas right at the frame rail, which is really nice, because that will give you, and if they don't make it for your car, just maybe make some out of some aluminum. It's got a little spacer to kind of space it off, and it'll kind of keep that direct heat off your lines, your brake lines and your fuel lines there. And then speaking of that sort of same thing, I wish I had some way to do grommets better. All of them kind of go in, and I can't get you in there, but all of them go through basically underneath of this big ass booster here through the firewall. And I've added a bunch of them, and the problem is, in order to put a proper grommet on it, you have to cut the wires, or you have to disconnect them, right, and run them through the grommet. So I wish I had figured that system, put a better grommet on it when I was doing all this. Right now I've just got some hush mat, I think, or kill mat or dyno mat or whatever the mat is. So I've made a little slit and just covered it up, and that's what I have right now, just kind of blocking that, keeping any kind of fumes or heat coming in from the engine bay. I did see that they make it a 2-piece, so maybe that's the answer, to kind of go in there and they kind of snap together, so you can just keep the existing wires going through the hole and then snap those two together. I don't know. Basically, one or two more, and then I got the biggest issue of all. So first, let's go back in the car here. My next thing is, I really wanted to keep all the stock gauges with this swap. So if that's your intent with this car, I really wanted to keep the stock gauges. You'll need different modules depending on what kind of gauge setup or what year your car is. You may have an existing speedometer that's electronic, that's VSS already. If so, you're probably good. You just have your transmission VSS going to your ECM, and then your ECM comes to your speedometer. In my case, I've got a cable. This is a cable-driven speedometer, so I had to buy the Dakota Digital box, which I'm actually doing a video on. I just recently installed that. I've been using like just a phone app with GPS so far. So I finally got that in there, and I'm making a video on that. So you'll need a module that's actually up in here that takes the VSS signal, converts it to the cable on these cars. So there's actually a cable that's running this. It's a motor that's generated speed enough, and it's configurable. So that's one thing you're gonna have to figure out. Also, the tachometer, pretty sure that, you know, it's not going to work out of the box. You can do, when I first did the swap, you know, I kind of regret it. I just did a pull-up resistor, which was basically, you put a 12 volt tied into a pull-up resistor, and that's, if you start your car and you think you've got the tach wired right, but it just sits there, they probably need a pull-up resistor. Just Google pull-up resistor on LS Swap tachs. You might see my video on that actually. But a better solution, what I wish I had done, and I did this later, is just getting Dakota Digital module that's for a tach, and it's very configurable, and it's just so much easier, right? It just needs a positive, a negative, the tach input, and that's basically it, man. It works so much better, and now it's working pretty well. Your other gauges here, the temperature, I just used a 3-wire instead of the stock 2-wire sensor. So one wire goes to the ECM, and then the other 2 wires, just, you know, one's a ground reference, and then the other one comes to the gauge. So just like stock. So that's pretty easy, nothing special there. Nothing really changes on the fuel gauge here. And then nothing really changes on your volts as well. And then your oil pressure, the only thing is, I used the LS oil sensor, and then that wire is going directly to this gauge through the C100 plug underneath the hood. So it's all the stock circuits there. But the problem is the ECM doesn't see any oil. So one of the regrets I have is I should have wired off of that circuit or sensors and got it to the ECM. So that might be something that I do, but something to consider, guys, right? I'm just trying to, you know, give you some things to consider here as you get through it. The next one is, I'm telling you, if I had to do this swap over, I would do Holley just about everything, especially the Terminator setup, the Holley Terminator, the harness, all that for the swap, man. That stuff is so expandable, great. Just, it's miles ahead of the GM stuff, and I would definitely do that different. That wasn't really widely available when I did this car at first, but now, man, just everybody's using that, and you should be too if you're doing a swap. I highly recommend that, Holley. So, you know, that's one thing. Another thing, at least for this car, they make a whole kit. You know, they make the LS Swap long tube headers, the setback plates, wheel pan. Of course, the thing that I'm running also is the transmission cross member. They even have a true dual exhaust. Now, it's only like a 2.5 inch, I don't know, but there was a reason why I didn't do that, and that's because I think that would probably be too small for the horsepower I'm running. But anyway, they have, you know, the mid mount, all the accessory mount for the, I mean, now, don't get me wrong, that's gonna be a crazy price point if you go all Holley, because it's expensive, but I feel like it's very, very well engineered, and I feel like it's just all works together. And the next swap I do, it's gonna be basically Holley just about everything. I'm not kidding, man. I feel like they really thought everything through on that, so that's definitely another thing. All right, and then the biggest regret I have, and you guys may guess this, but It's called the snowball effect of money, spending money. I don't care what kind of budget you come into this thing with your LS swap, you're gonna have some type of budget and you're gonna blow the hell out of that budget. So the one regret I have is that this thing just snowballed, right? It was like a snowball headed to hell. As Waylon Jennings would say, it's a snowball headed to hell. I don't know, I can't sing, but anyway, you get the point. You're doing this and you're like, oh, let me do a different cam. Oh, let me put a supercharger. Now I need to upgrade my fuel system. Now I need to do, you know, okay, now I've got too much power from my rear end. I got to change my rear. And so you end up, you make this one thing, and I'm dealing with this right now. I got this drag pack here, and it's a good example. I was like, hey, let me put, you know, I've got the US mags that I run on the street, 18s, and I bought some 15-inch for the back and these 17s for the front. And I was like, yeah, let me give me a drag pack. Nope. These brakes don't work for 15-inch rims. Either these are the LS1s, and I've tried grinding them. But anyway, now I've got to get a different set of rear brakes, and it just snowballs, right? And then, okay, now I got to pull the axles out. I got to, you know, and I'm not going to do it. I'm actually going to take the axles to a shop so they could put the other backing plates on. They got to repress the bearings on, and these things just snowball, and that's just what the life we've chosen, I guess. But anyway, all that to say is, you know, pick your budget. You might as well times it by 2. And I don't care if you're just going to get a junkyard motor, use a stock harness, you know, splice it into your existing platform. It doesn't matter. You're going to run into things that you're going to have to spend some money on. And, you know, it's just going to happen, right? So for me, I've spent a ton of money in this car, and I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I've got all these regrets, but this car is sick. I mean, it's crazy, man. It's a fun car to have. And anyway, guys, that's the list for today, man. So comment below, what do you think some of your challenges are with your LS swap? What would you have done different? Comment below and let us know. That's today's video, guys. Please consider subscribing. I'm trying to get to that 10,000 mile marker here this year, so I really appreciate any kind of support that you can give. Anyway, hope you have a great day and hope you enjoyed the video.